The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. When Jesus had crossed in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was by the sea. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live." So Jesus went with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you? How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and touched him, told him the whole truth. Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." Jesus allowed no one to follow him. When they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Jesus put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about, for she was 12 years old. At this they were overcome with amazement. He strictly ordered them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. The Gospel of the Lord. Mother Teresa was a very saintly woman, but she also filled with wisdom. One time when talking about poverty in the world, she says, "God did not create poverty. We did, because we don't share." What is true of poverty is also true of many misfortunes in life. It's not true, sometimes when we feel like we're in pain, suffering, and feel lonely, depression. Sometimes when we are going through our most difficult time, sometimes we feel so alone. It seems like there's nobody there to help to support us. What is true of poverty and misfortunes in life is also true of death. In the first reading, we are told that God did not make death. God's plan was that we will live eternal life, and that God was going to make a way for us to enter into God's heavenly kingdom. That was God's plan. But death exists because we chose death, or more specifically, because Adam and Eve have chosen to sin. And through their disobedience, the result of disobedience is to get what they chose, which is rejecting of God's plan of salvation and God's life. And therefore, the end result is death. But what happened is that Jesus became one of us, because the only way to make it right, the only person who can make it right is Jesus. So Jesus says, "I'm going to become one of you and do it right." So death became no longer the punishment that it became as a result of Adam and Eve. Now it's become an entranceway or passage for us to enter into eternity. The only way that we are going to enter into eternity and receive the fruits of Jesus' death, salvation, is for us to, all of us, experience death. God did not make death, but God changed the reality of death and turned it into a blessing, so to speak. In the gospel today, we see two stories juxtaposed together. So we have synagogue leader Jairus. His daughter was at the point of death. And we also have women who has been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years, and she receiving this healing. I'm sure you got this, but when we look at the detail, Jairus' daughter and a woman. Jairus' daughter is made reference to her father, who loved her so much that he came to talk to Jesus. Because as you understand, sometimes we have a lot of these religious authorities who were hostile to Jesus. The Pharisees and Sadducees and all these people were hostile towards him. So for a leader of the synagogue to come to Jesus, he could have been made fun of. He could have lost his job. But what was more important than his title and his position and security was his daughter. That he was going to go through whatever the humiliation or a rejection from his own people in order for him to save his daughter. That's exactly what happens in our life too, right? I mean, so often people want to come and talk to me. Father, can you pray for my father, my mother, my uncle, my son and daughter, my friend? People come because they care about somebody who is not well or who needs intervention. But this woman, because of her illnesses, that she had no one to care for. And here's hypocrisy. So people who suffer from disease, leprosy, or in this case, hemorrhage, this person was considered ritually impure. So what that means is that if this person touched you, you became ritually impure. So you can't allow someone like her to enter into your house. Things that she touched, you have to burn it or throw in the garbage. I can assure you, in her day, there was no credit card where she could have paid. Could I just tap it? Beep, right? She had to carry her money around, and had to pay a physician. So she was ritually impure. Everything she touched will become ritually impure, but accepting money from her was okay. Like, do you understand this logic? Right? It's and by that, thinking like, okay, so she paid the doctor. Doctor went to the market and paid this person. This person brought the money home. Like, the whole society has been tainted, right? I remember back in the seminary, a seminary professor, shared with us the book that he read about aftermath of World War II, right? People were blaming. You are a sellout. You helped the Germans and so forth. And then this person wrote a book and says, who's really at fault? I mean, people who own gas stations, did you not sell gas to the Germans? People who made those canisters and who could have, put gas, and then carry with them, like, were you not complicit in some way? People who sold water and bread to the Germans, like, are we not all complicit? Like, yeah, we all are responsible in some way, some degree. And it's true of people who suffer from misfortunes in life too. Like, in some way, we have failed in our charity. Maybe we judged a person. Maybe we didn't help the person in a way that we could have, should have, and would have. But one thing that we know is that when there was a time when nobody claimed this woman and she was referred to as a woman, Jesus claimed her. God claimed her because Jesus, in the authority of divine person, said, my daughter, your faith has made you well. And this is exactly the will of the Father, will of God. Does He not love us? Like, we all know how to give good gifts to our children, people that we love. And it is no different when it comes to God and His loving heart. The reward of faith is a healing and blessing that we receive. Most often, we don't receive blessing, we don't receive healing because we lack in our faith. We lack in our humility. So let us thank God for His loving mercy and grace. And in all things, let us approach the throne of God's grace in humility and with faith. Because then when we do, we would open ourselves into the fullness of grace and blessing that God has always intended to give us.